Yes. So I am Sarah Jane Madden. Thank you for having me on Lost Dialogues. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at the Sensing Technologies Group, which is part of Fortive, which is a big American conglomerate. Why do I bother telling you that? It's because of what we do. We do a lot of what I refer to as silent technology. That is the technology that's around you all day, every day. How did you get here today? Transport, we're there, okay? Particularly the sensing technologies that are developed in Europe. Nuclear power plants, hospitals, ATMs, bank machines. And the reason that's relevant to threat modelling is our threat landscape is massive. It is to the horizon. It's every type of threat because we're in every type of industry. So we can't afford to say, we know our lane, we stick to it. We need to think a bit more broadly. I've been a developer for 2 decades, not to date myself, similar amount of times as what we used to call system administrator. I know there's all sorts of fancy names for that now. And I'm an application security champion. That means different things to different people. I see some people wearing the champion hoodies today, which is wonderful. From when I started on this journey, it really just means she likes to bang on about it a lot, so evangelist, champion, whatever, but I just keep going on about it because I think it's worth it. Now, if you're here and you think, I have no tools to sell you, you don't, as I said, the technology that we do is part of your life already, so I'm not going to go through if you think you're going to learn how to threat model, that's tomorrow. Somebody's going to do that with you. What I have to offer you are war stories from the trenches, really. Kudos if you get the reference to Lawyer Cat. If you don't, go put it on Twitter or whatever that's now known as. And I'll close my eyes if you just want to shuffle out and get another coffee and go, no, I was here to learn how to do threat modeling. This is a little sidebar, but if it's the only thing you take from the next 40 minutes or 30 minutes, it'll be worthwhile. So, I've always said it, and I'm not original in this, that software engineering is a mixture of science and art, okay? You will not get a rock star developer who just churns out code. Nobody gives you a perfect spec in the first place anyway, or if you've seen one, I'd like to see it too. And frankly, if you just code spec, that's all you do. See previous presentations, AI is about to do you out of the job anyway. A rockstar developer is someone who brings that creativity to it, sees what the software can do, sees what you really wanted it to do in the first place, thinks what it can do, what it shouldn't do, etc. Cybersecurity and software engineering are two highly technical fields. I think we'll all agree on that. But you've got to recognise that they're not just that. And that's where cybersecurity, whether you're coming from the development background or wherever you're coming from, you've got to appreciate that it's hearts and minds too. It's not a bunch of tools, it's not a bunch of reports. Yep, you need that, that's SecOps, you need your monitoring, etc. But if that's all you've got, you're probably fairly useless. Chocolate teapot is about where you are, okay? You're that crowd over in the corner who just cause problems, okay? So, hearts and minds, science and art, and that comes very much into what we're going to talk about. So if you've been any type of time in, I always go towards development, but application support or anything else like that, you've had an incident. And if you're of the engineering, solution-oriented mindset, at some point during that incident, or maybe towards the end of it, you've sat and gone, how did we end up here? Okay? And with a bit of luck, that thought process has gone to, how did we end up here? And how do we never end up here again? Okay? And this is what brought me on my somewhat circuitous journey through development and SecOps and whatnot into security. And I was responsible for an application security program, but not just designing it, but implementing it and rolling it out. And that's different from this security team in an ivory tower or in a corner or whatever, where just the grand idea is there's a PowerPoint and it goes, you go do that, right? Yeah, I'll monitor reports and tell your bosses when you don't do it. Okay? So, with skin in the game, I went to go and go, how do we not end up here again? How do we do better? So I went to conferences like this. I read tutorials, everything. I discovered threat modeling. Probably in the same way as Christopher Columbus discovered America, in that it was already there. But I discovered threat modeling, and I went, this is genius, right? Shifted so far left that I never had that 3 a.m. call again. No brainer. Let's do it. Let's just go. Slight problem. Why can't we just do threat modeling? Now, hands up here. Who's in a startup? Okay. Now, you're probably going to come out and tell me outside that's not how startups work nowadays. But in theory, right, you're kind of saying you have a chance to do things right from the start. Okay. I am talking about large groups of developers working on code older than they are. Okay. Doesn't mean it's bad code. In fact, it means it's good code because people have continued to use it over decades. Okay. And anyway, who have looked at plenty of the material online will recognize this is a sample diagram, but no real system looks anything like this. Okay? A lot of the material that you find out there, and there's some great books and great tutorials, etc., but they start from here for simplicity. Go back to university, whatever topics you took, your first lecture probably started from a point of simplicity. And there's reasons for that, okay? It's to get the idea in there. The problem was, I and a few kind of merry brothers that I brought along for the ride got off, got all excited about this, and then sat down and went, how do we do this now? And this is because you're looking at things that are more like this, okay? And this would even only be a tiny little modular thing. Again, some of you probably recognize this and go, hang on, I've seen that exact one, that's not hers. No, it's not mine, okay? Couple of reasons I wouldn't share a real one here. One, I value your eyesight, okay? And actually, when you just hear like, the other is, and we've talked about transparency earlier today already, okay? But when you're in that nascent part of your threat modeling journey, okay, unless you have the confidence to say, we have addressed this, we're ready to open source it as such, we're ready to share it, and I know there's legislation coming down that talks about requiring companies to share this. But for the moment, if you're just getting started on this, you are publishing a blueprint for your application. And that may not always be the best idea, okay? Your adversary is, they're out there. They're perfectly capable of threat modeling your application. In some cases better than you are. Don't give them a leg up, so I'm not going against the whole transparency. I'm not going back a decade and going to security through obscurity. I'm just being really practical about it and going, if you get excited on this journey, yes, share it internally, etc., but be careful what you're sharing externally. Okay. So, all full of excitement. They're doing from a development backgrounds, like good partnerships in engineering. Hey, have you heard about threat modeling? Well-intended engineering leadership said, sure, we'll give you a team, let's give this a go. Alright? They gave me essentially not a development team. It was really a team of architects who were working more R&D type stuff. The idea being both they had, they were solid technical people and they could absorb interruptions. They weren't on tickets the whole time. They were fine. So we had some great sessions. We used the elevation of privilege card game that you might have heard of. We started with exercises like those things. We then tried to bring it into some of their code, and it was all great, and we had great fun, and we were all very proud of ourselves. Right? But as we approached kind of the 3-month mark, I kind of realised, what next? And I realised there was no roadmap, and that was because we hadn't actually produced anything. We'd had fun, we'd produced PowerPoints, engineering management were well chuffed with themselves, they were put on ops reviews that we now do threat modelling and all the rest. And we hadn't produced a single story, a Jira, a fix, anything. It was really being seen as, in fact, I saw it going to people's performance reviews that they'd done threat modelling training. Okay, and this was just a training thing. We weren't going anywhere. So
I had failed. I had not implemented threat modelling. And some of this becomes the story of how did Sarah Jane not get fired. Okay, and I don't really have the answer to that. Look, I would say. But I had suffered a failure to launch. A lot of noise, a lot of hurrah that we were doing, and then, okay. So it was like, what am I going to do next? I started with why have I failed, and then not to do the I for 5 whys, but I came around to, I was asking the wrong why. I was like, I'd never asked the why in the first place about why we should do threat modelling. I could see it kind of almost academically, it was like, this is a great idea. It was technically sound, etc. But why should the business really care? You know, why the problem with our engineering leadership was probably that they're too technically good. They could see the reason for it too, but we hadn't really asked why should we do this other than best practice. In the commercial world, best practice is not always a solid reason to do something, okay? And I started to look at why should they really do this? Why should they interrupt a product roadmap, etc.? So I went to Jira. Realised that other ticketing systems are available, but ours happened to be Jira. And to use my usual hacking, badly done queries and all the rest, and I said, if I could find one ticket that wouldn't have happened if we'd done threat modelling, I have a case, and I maybe have a direction, and I have a why, okay? I actually found many, and I found many for one team, not to pick on them, but I found many for one team, and this kind of changed my thinking. I had been in, these type of things where it's like, oh, you should have everybody from sales to legal to the person who makes the coffee in the room for threat modelling because everybody has input. That's great, that's very expensive, and it's not very practical. Okay, so I stayed with my people. I stayed with my folks. I had engineering in. But when I saw these tickets, I realized, I don't know about where you work, but in many of the organizations I work in, product managers own the developers' souls, okay? They literally tell them what they can do and what they can't do. And it was product managers, because as I hacked through all their queries in Jira, I was realizing I was hacking through product managers' queries. So I went to the product manager and I said, do you remember Jira 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? And he went, yes, I do. Right? Because these had been interruptions to his roadmap. These had messed with his plan. And I was like, what if I told you there was a way that these never should have happened? And he was like, I am listening. Okay. And he brought this idea. I sort of wanted to try again with his team, perhaps. But he was more excited about it and also possibly didn't want to point at his team needing to do this. And he went back to the entire product management organization and said, we need to do this threat modeling thing because we're never going to have an interruption again. Possibly not So suddenly we got thrown into big time. We had a slot on an all hands, all them. Why do it for one team? We're all going to do it, okay? And that was where we went next, and we explained threat modeling in 30 seconds, and developers being developers go, we know what that is, that's fine. We'll do it, we have sprint time to do it, and everybody went off. Problem was, we were literally only one page ahead of the developers on this thing. And developers are smart people, okay? So and we became a bottleneck for the questions, some of them philosophical and some of them technical. So they just went off inventing, as they do, inventing solutions. But we ran into another problem then, because it became a little bit war of the buttons, okay? It became a bit territorial. Our calendars were filling up with lunch and learns and meetings and threat modelling according to Team A to be presented and adopted by everybody. Threat modelling according to Team B 30 minutes later to be adopted by everybody. And it just became ridiculous. It was a bit like letting a bunch of toddlers into the art box, okay? There was glitter and glue everywhere and no actual art being done, okay? So we weren't seeing any good change out of it. We had a Jira administrator nearly quit or kill me because another team decided to go the other extreme and pump everything straight into Jira, which, like with any tool or tooling or process, we just got hundreds of threats going in. And it was like, Sarah Jane, why have I got 3,000 Jiras created in one day? And I was like, okay. So we couldn't do that either. And frankly, we just had to say, stop. Okay? Just stop. And this brings me to the story of the tale of Goldilocks. Okay? We had found a couple of ways that didn't work. Okay? We had the people who weren't really developing an active product, let everybody do it their own way and go nuts. And yep, this is the bit where you're probably going, now I see why this is a story of how did she not get fired. That's a lot of development time that she's absorbed at this stage. But through all this discussion, we discovered that we had a team in Amsterdam who had kind of been doing this all along. Okay? And they've been doing it by a different name. But they've come to us through acquisition. They were just they are a very good team. They're solid. They just did their own thing. And they had a lot of regulatory requirements and customer commitments, which meant they did threat modeling by a different name. So I was like, bingo. I can finally leverage pre-made, just bring it to everybody. They've proven it works. So I sat in with them, notebook in hand, and said, great, let's just do this. And we'll copy and paste to every other team. But the realization came upon me that they were running smoothly. Theirs was a very nuanced version of threat modeling because it had been built specifically over time to these requirements of these contracts, etc. So it was a one-size-didn't-fit-all. This wasn't going to be translatable to the other teams. The other realization that hit me was the reason they were so good was they had been doing this since they were a greenfield site. They had records going back. The people weren't even still there. This had always been part of the process. So really what I was looking at was a mature team that had started from greenfields. That was not what I was trying to deal with elsewhere. So I needed to find someone that we could really get traction with. And I finally turned to what were the least attractive group to me from the start. Nothing personal about them, all lovely people, but unattractive in this sense. These were the people in the middle who were working on super busy products that had loads of customer engagement. They wanted a blue button this week, a green button next week. Can I do the reports this way? Can I do the report? They were they were like the blue collar workers of software. They're just churning this stuff out all the time. And by some grace, I was allowed to get in with them. The nice thing about them, two nice things. One was they could see interruptions, bugs, etc. are pretty much a disaster for them because they're moving down the road so quick. They're kind of going, no, we can't deal with this. So the thoughts of eliminating some or any of that were, very attractive to them. The other thing is they're so busy that they hadn't got time to make a cottage industry out of this. Okay, they needed something that worked fast, and naturally, because they were turning out so many tickets, turning change around so fast, it also meant that as they started to threat model, they set their scope very tightly to what they were doing, and they iterated fast. So did we get it right the first time? No. The second time? No. Maybe not the 15th time. But those iterations were small and fast, right? And from that, we actually got something that was like tested in the fires of hell, really. And then it was, if it worked for them, it was definitely going to work for our research architects and our group up in Amsterdam were able to go, yeah, that's fine, we'll take the bits from that. So we suddenly had this sort of standard work. And when you're working with large groups of developers who are not all working on the same product, and you've got one security team and indeed one organization, that type of scale is key. That's what will give you success, okay, is having some sort of allow for flexibility, but prove something that will work for everybody. It doesn't have to be perfect, okay? As I said, that group up in Amsterdam were doing some very formal stuff that we just let them keep doing because it worked for them. But we now had sort of a template that would work for the common man. So, you think this is great. End presentation, let's all have another coffee, we see the time, it's clearly ran perfectly. Not so much. So I'm not sure if you heard of this thing called COVID. Alright, it happened. And people the world changed. People went into their bubbles, figuratively and literally, and way more working from home. Now, we'd always been working with distributed teams anyway, but now we had everybody at home. And some teams walked away from the whiteboards quite successfully. Okay, so if you've dipped into threat modeling, some people do it whiteboards, some people do it in digital tools, etc. And some people, that was fine for them. And others not so much. But I was in my attic at home thinking threat modeling is running itself all along. And one day I got this fortuitous phone call, again from a product manager. And this kind of speaks to why partnerships outside of engineering are important. Not only had they gotten us to the stage, but they were still kind of involved, and we built that understanding that he felt it was important to ring me about this. And he went, "Hi Sarah Jane, shooting the breeze, all the rest. Reason I rang you. Last 3 threat modeling exercises, we produced no stories." Well, clearly the software is perfect. And he said, "Now let's explore maybe some other possibilities. Let's look into it." So I got off the phone and I did some digging around, and I kind of said, who did the threat modeling? When was it done? Etc. etc. And it turned out we now had the same developer who was doing the ticket, who was updating the diagrams that you need for threat modeling, etc., was doing the threat modeling and then sending it to you, their peer, for review overnight or whatever. You're opening it up, coffee in hand, going, yeah, it looks good to me. Okay? So people will naturally do that. They'll cut the edges off processes anyway. Sometimes refine it, sometimes make it better. But in this case, we'd reduced it some of the teams had reduced it to just this checkbox exercise, and we lost the value in it as well. So they were opening up the data flow diagrams, sticking in a new box or something, and running a tool. And that's another slight sidebar, I would say. There's loads of tools out there, and they're great, okay? And AI is coming down the track fairly fast on this as well. If you reduce threat modeling, and this is back to my creativity and science thing, if you reduce this to tools, if you're just running a diagram through it, you've missed the point, okay? You have to have that kind of human supervision, to borrow a phrase from AI, and just see, what could go wrong, what's practical to go wrong, Yes, missiles might land from Mars, but your developers know which threats are more likely to actually hit your application. So this is kind of what had happened subconsciously to some of the teams. So we found that we really just needed, what's gone wrong? We needed a reboot. And this is where, whether you're in a security champions type of mode, or you have a security team and you've AppSec people, whoever is responsible for the success of this. And it's very easy to say, well, everyone's responsible for the success. Developers are responsible for the success of this. Well, developers are responsible for an awful lot more as well. So they need somebody in their corner. So we went back to kind of supervised sessions, okay, making some of the people come together. But we were very clear, these weren't meetings, okay? These weren't check-ins because you'll be doing a bad job during COVID, okay? This was back in there and asking, the 4 questions of threat modeling. What are you working on? Okay. What might go wrong? Not stop showing me the diagram and pressing run on analysis. What might go wrong? You tell me, John. You tell me, Anne. What might go wrong with it? Okay. I didn't have the answers, but it was just about prompting. Okay. What are you going to do about it? No, don't drag another item onto the screen to show me where you're going to put it. Tell me, what are you going to do about it? And then, have we done a good enough job? And that's an important part of this whole threat modeling thing if you're trying to make it successful. You are introducing another barrier between your software being written and getting out to the commercial market and making money. Okay? It's for good reason, but you should time box it and tie that to your scope. Okay? It seems a little bit infantile saying you only have 30 minutes, or you have 90 minutes at the start of a release or whatever. I've seen it. It can go on for weeks, okay, if people are given the things. So we found, for the teams that had started to go stale, this phone call from product manager manager. It only dawned on me about a year later that maybe he was ringing me in the hope that I'd say, do you know what, forget doing it. You don't need to do it anymore. That never crossed my mind at the time. So it was like, I just went on, okay, you want to fix this. But looking at your output and keeping an eye on your output, I wouldn't say measure by tickets or anything like that, but just make sure, particularly if you're managing large teams, are we still getting something from this? Or even if it's in your own team, if it's a small team, are we still getting something from this? Or do we need a swift kick up and refresh? You know, what are we really doing with this? Okay? Now, apart from my angels up in Amsterdam that I know has gone about, people come afterwards and go, who are they? They sound so perfect. So I was like, they are kind of good. One size generally doesn't fit all, right? This is not an exhaustive list. In fact, it's a tiny list. But there's a couple of key things just to get you thinking. Architecture matters. Okay? Some products and some development teams, they leverage the infrastructure they're on massively as a feature of a product. In which case, no matter what you call them, sysadmins or cloud operations or technical operations, they need to be in the room too. Other products, it's fairly agnostic. It doesn't really matter. It can run here, run there. This week we're running here. Next week we're in Kubernetes, whatever. It doesn't really matter. It's not a major feature of the application. Then that's a waste of the infrastructure people's time. If they're just going to sit there doing this, looking at their phone, whatever, that's not a good use of time. So make that judgment. How integrated, how important is the architecture to the product? And decide then whether you need, who you need in the room. And that's something that you should do anyway. As I said, you'll read the literature and it will tell you everybody from sales to legal need to be in the room. Make a judgment call on how important is it. Maybe have them in once. Maybe have them in when you're making a major change in that area. But make sure you brief them on what this is. This is not where they come out with a bunch of extra requirements, and ask for their opinion. Team geography matters, okay? We have teams that are all co-located and do still like to come to the office and all the rest, and they whiteboard the living daylights out of this stuff, and there's pizza boxes left everywhere, and that's fine, and that works for them, okay? We have teams where no one member is in the same time zone, okay? We have to make sure, based on that lesson learned, that it isn't just being reduced to some sort of like visual code review is what it boils down to. That's useless, okay? And then you have to look at things like tightly coupled and loosely coupled systems, okay? If you've got loosely coupled systems and they're all done beautifully and they're microservices and they're function driven and all the rest, it's quite okay to just have 3 of you in a room, virtual or otherwise, because that's your scope and you're looking at this. And threat modeling is a lot about boundaries. But you can look within those boundaries and threat model that. And that makes sense that maybe only once a year, once a quarter, you need to engage with the outside world. If that's loosely coupled. For tightly coupled, where everything, it's very important. If I'm not holding your hand when the living room goes there, even though we're separate teams, it's all going to break. Then you probably need everybody in the room, okay? And it's a bigger exercise and you have to kind of look at organizational behavior as to how you manage that. But look at the system. If it's a tightly coupled system and you're only modeling your bit of it, you're going to miss things. We all have this thing of, well, that's reporting, that's Tom, and that's the invoicing screen. That goes to Mary, But if it's all tied together, then maybe you need to get Tom and Mary for the first time in 10 years into the room together to actually talk to each other. In the interest of time and boredom, I won't tell you my epiphany story about being at an Irish dancing championship when this came to mind. But any top athletes, Irish dancers included, they don't just, there's a lot of things they do that you can actually transfer to threat modeling, or to successful threat modeling, okay? And it's about muscle memory is a big phrase that's used. A little and often. If they don't do 6 hours of training in one go before a championship, they'd hurt themselves, too much too late, etc. Okay? They will do a little bit every night or 3 nights a week or something like this. When they are working on a 3-minute performance, okay, at the top level, and this is, again, whether it's gymnasts or Irish dancers or whatever, If there's something going wrong in the middle of it, they won't go and, I'm going to start the whole thing over again and do it again and again. They will go and they will concentrate on that one bit. And they might spend a whole hour doing that one bit. But they've set the scope until they get it right. Because if they keep doing the whole thing, they'll be improving bits that don't need to be improved and they'll never focus on it. It's the same with your code. If you've a problem in an area or an area that needs attention, set the scope, concentrate on it, and blow it back out afterwards. And then, just like any performer, iterate, okay? And then it will become, I will be honest, threat modeling is hard to get started, okay? It is hard. We all think we know what it is because you've been doing it since you got up this morning. You've been doing it since you were a child, okay? You're going, what am I doing? What might go wrong? Etc. But when you actually bring it, that's part of the joy of it and part of the problem with it when you try and bring it to application or product development, is transferring that to the exactness of what you're doing. So it needs, but it's worth it. It's worth the journey, and it does become muscle memory. And then, I don't know if any of you have ever been part of an agile transformation, sort of from waterfall to agile, that type of thing, and it seemed like all these extra processes. And now it just becomes what you do. And it's the same with threat modeling. And another side note that I'm not going to get into because there's plenty of it on LinkedIn, but does agile fit with threat modeling? Yes, it does. Anyone who looked at the brief of this and is trying to set up threat modeling might have been hoping that I'd have a bunch of dashboards up here now and they just copy them and go, that's what I'm going to report to my management. Not so, I'm afraid. But in any commercial organisation, enterprise organisation, you need to measure. It's very hard to measure what's not there, what hasn't happened. So we had 0 security incidents last month and last quarter. Sarah Jane, you've introduced this practice and now we have 0. Massive improvement. Well done. We're so glad we spent time with you. Okay. So that can be hard to do. So whilst that is what you're secretly driving for, there are some other things that you can put out there to sell this. Okay. Everybody's in sales essentially at some point. One is improved documentation. You can't really do threat modeling if you don't know what you're threat modeling. Okay. If you walk into a room and go, I know this product really well, and Tom knows the reporting suite very well and all the rest, and you try to sit down and threat model, you'll have a discussion, you'll get nowhere. So you need some sort of data flow diagrams. Some people bring in architectural diagrams as a cheat at the start, whatever works for you, okay? You also get a better and refreshed understanding of the system, okay? Because you can have quite an old system, and Anne and Mary haven't talked in 10 years, remember, and they suddenly have to step through the whole thing, and you're in this threat modeling group, and people are asking, how does this get from here to here? It just does. But how? Because I'm just wondering on the boundary there, automatically, it just does, you know. And you may have written it, but it was 5 years ago, and I was a different person 5 years ago, and you're like, do you know what, I don't remember, I'll have to dig into that. So you get this refreshed understanding of these older systems as well. And you remove silos. You get reporting guy and invoice screen girl back in the room, and they realise he's been doing a load of transformation that's not necessary, because she could have just done it that way in the first place. It's not what threat modeling is about, but it's a side bonus. So look, in conclusion, do set the scope, okay? Threat modeling can be vast, not likely to be successful if you go the boil the ocean route. A little and often. Think about the performers, the athletes, etc. You've set the scope to do it, that makes it doable within a short period of time, so just do it again and again. Practical advice, time box the activity, because you are appealing to that creative part of the developer, and that can roll on and on and on, and you're most likely working in a business that's trying to make money. Meet the development teams where they are at, okay? Some, we have those who know their systems inside out, those who are working on 30-year-old systems with no documentation, those who can happily work in a dispersed model, those who need their hands held and 4 questions asked repeatedly, okay? And the key thing, that came out of my partnership with product management and casting that net a bit wider, it was a product manager who taught me to watch out for staleness, okay? I had a process in, job done, moved on, and he was the one who spotted that there was nothing going. Now, I'll caution against measuring the number of tickets coming out, okay? One team could be producing 30, another could produce 1 per release, okay? The quality of the one might far exceed the 30. And you don't want people driving towards, I just produced a lot of tickets that go into Jira and get closed a week later as not an issue. We're doing great threat modeling. So just watch for genuine staleness and output. The reason for the dog on the screen is, the bottom line is you can teach an old dog new tricks, okay? Established teams working on profitable software that have never been doing this before, there is value in doing it, and they can do it. And that's it for Far From Green Fields. Have we questions or time for questions? Or? He said thank you.
Thank you. We definitely have some minutes for time for one or two questions. Any questions for Sarah on track modeling?
There's one.
Yes.
Any experiences with automation? So threat modeling, automation, and development teams, and how that works or not?
Yeah, and I'll start by saying I'm a big fan of automation, right? You're not an engineer if you're not intrinsically lazy and trying to find ways to get a machine to do it for you. The key is around that, turning it in, knocking the edges off the process and taking out the creativity. I would encourage you to start with teams and getting them to even draw it on a board, that type of engagement between the brain and the hand, or draw it digitally. And as you mature, introduce the automation, because, and this is a big thing that's coming up in the discussion around AI and threat modeling, is that if you stop exercising that part of your brain, or in the case of a team adopting it, if you go straight to automation and they've not really learned the process, they're not able to deal with the output of it. They've lost the intelligence part of it, etc. But it's definitely a way of, a bit like, why do we not still do manual code reviews when we do SAS? Because it's much faster, much more accurate, etc. You should introduce automation, but my vote on it would be teach the actual process first, understand what the automation is doing, and then automate for your life.
Anyone else?
There.
One more question.
I have a question since I'm a product owner and you spoke about product managers. So did you also put in the functional potential threats or just tech?
Oh no, very much functional. So that's why you will hear a lot about get everybody in the room. You don't want it to be a discussion of this protocol doing this, that, and the other. That's why you want the product manager and maybe a salesperson and maybe a support person in the room, and you can translate that back down to what do we technically need to do about it. But you need those different points. Diversity is key to good threat modeling.
Yeah, because that's my idea too, and I'm really happy to hear that from you. Not everybody says that.
Well, I'll keep saying it.
How is AI going to save the world?
Well, hello, in terms of, a lot of the tool producers of this are looking to AI, but I'm going to refer to the previous presentation on SAS. It's coming. It will expedite things, but it still needs human supervision. AI is probably initially going to tell you that missiles will come from Mars and blow up your software, and you're kind of going, as the developer of the product, I think we've got a problem with data leakage that might rank higher. So it'll speed things up, but my fear for it, without being fear AI, is that again, a bit like the automation, is that people will lose the skill and just go, the computer says this, So yeah, that's where I think it's going.
Thank you.